When a man hurts you, something inside you shifts. Your nervous system tightens. Your mind starts searching for answers. Your heart wants closure, justice, clarity, or sometimes just acknowledgement. But this speech is not about him. It is about you understanding your emotional terrain, reclaiming your power, and learning how to respond in a way that disarms manipulation, confusion, disrespect, or carelessness. This is about elevating yourself to a place where you are no longer a participant in someone else's chaos. And once you reach that level of emotional self-control, you naturally confuse the man who thought he could hurt you without consequence. Because nothing is more unsettling than a woman who withdraws her emotional availability and steps into her power with calm precision. Most people imagine strength as loudness, confrontation, or dramatic reactions. But real strength, the kind that unsettles someone who tried to hurt you, is rooted in psychological steadiness. It is the ability to regulate your emotions even when someone triggers you. When someone disrespects you, they often expect you to explode, collapse, argue, cry, or chase. But when you choose to respond with calm, intentional emotional intelligence, you destabilize their expectations. You remove the reaction they counted on, and in that moment of silence, distance, and emotional neutrality, you introduce something far more powerful than anger. You introduce uncertainty. And uncertainty is where your power begins. Before you can shift any dynamic with another person, you must first understand your own emotional landscape. When a man hurts you, your body reacts long before your mind catches up. Your chest tightens, your hands get cold, your stomach feels unsettled. These reactions are not weakness, they are signals. Your nervous system is trying to alert you that something in this connection is not safe. Many women ignore these signals because they want to keep the peace, avoid conflict, or hope the situation improves. But emotional intelligence begins with listening to those signals without judgment. You are not overreacting, you are sensing, you are perceiving. And the first step to reclaiming your power is acknowledging the internal truth of your own experiences. Once you understand what you feel, the next step is to pause. Pausing is one of the most powerful psychological tools you have. Most people react instantly when they are hurt. They send the paragraph text, they confront, they defend, they try to fix the situation, they try to prove their innocence or worth. But when you pause, you interrupt that instinct. You create space between the trigger and the response. And in that space, you regain clarity, rationality, and composure. You shift from emotional impulsivity to conscious intention. You move from being controlled by the moment to controlling the moment yourself. This pause is not silence from fear. It is silence from strength. And here is where confusion begins for the man who hurt you. He expects the familiar pattern. He expects the argument, the emotional reaction, or the attempt to hold on. But when you pause instead of react, he loses access to the predictable version of you he once knew. Emotional consistency is what most people rely on to maintain control. Once you break that pattern, you reclaim the psychological advantage. This pause also gives you time to evaluate the situation more honestly. Often when someone hurts you, the mind wants to focus on the pain rather than the pattern. But you must ask yourself deeper questions. Was this behavior accidental or intentional? Was it a moment of human imperfection or a reflection of deeper character? Does this man take accountability or avoid responsibility? Does he show remorse? Or does he downplay your feelings? Does he try to repair the damage, or does he expect you to keep going as if nothing happened? Emotional intelligence is not about suppressing your feelings. It is about interpreting behavior with clarity, not romantic bias. When you allow yourself to see him clearly, you gain a new understanding of the dynamic. Hurtful behavior is often rooted in insecurity, entitlement, or emotional immaturity. Some men hurt you because they want control. Others hurt you because they lack emotional discipline. Some do it because they assume you will tolerate it, and others because they simply do not value anyone enough to act differently. None of these are reflections of your worth. They are reflections of his emotional limitations. Now, here is the part that changes everything. When a man hurts you, your instinct is to explain your pain. You want him to understand what he did. You want him to recognize the damage. You want him to validate your experience. But true emotional power is not gained by trying to convince someone of your value. It is gained by showing through action that you value yourself. And you do that by removing your emotional energy from anyone who mistreats it. This does not mean disappearing or playing games. It means responding with grounded composure. When you speak clearly. When you set a boundary, you set it calmly. You do not attack. You do not chase. You do not plead. You stand in your truth without shaking. And this is where you begin to confuse him. He expected your emotions to work in his favor, but instead your self-control shows him that hurting you does not give him power. It takes power away from him. There is a psychological principle that says people pay attention when something breaks a pattern. If you were emotionally expressive before and now you are calm, deliberate, and composed, he will notice instantly. If you used to respond quickly and now you take your time, he feels the shift. If you used to explain yourself and now you simply state what you will and will not accept, he feels the gap between who you were and who you are becoming. And this gap creates confusion, not the petty manipulative kind, but the kind that makes a man realize he underestimated you. You must understand something essential. Your strength is not in how loudly you speak, but in how clearly you see. When a man hurts you, do not lose yourself trying to change him. Do not abandon your dignity trying to fix the situation. Do not exhaust your emotional bandwidth trying to win someone back. Your power is not in convincing him. Your power is in conserving yourself. This emotional conservation creates an entirely new dynamic. He begins to question what is happening. Why aren't you reacting the way you once did? Why aren't you fighting to prove anything? Why do you seem calm instead of broken? Why do you feel distant instead of desperate? These questions make him more aware of his own actions, because without your emotional response to distract him, he is left facing himself. And many people cannot handle that level of self-confrontation. That is where the shift begins. But for this shift to truly happen, you must ground yourself in emotional neutrality. Neutrality is not indifference. It is balance. It is the ability to acknowledge your emotions without being consumed by them. It is the ability to stand in your truth without collapsing. When you are neutral, you do not seek revenge or validation. You simply operate with self-respect. And self-respect is the ultimate source of feminine strength. This strength communicates something silently but powerfully. You cannot shake me. And when a man realizes he cannot shake you, he loses the psychological advantage he once assumed he had. The absence of your reaction forces him into unfamiliar territory. It pushes him to wonder whether he misjudged your emotional dependency. It makes him question his own behavior. It makes him examine the space between you with a deeper sense of awareness. And often, this is the moment he begins to feel the consequences of his own actions. But remember, the goal is not to make him regret. The goal is not to manipulate. The goal is to reclaim your emotional authority so you can move from hurt to clarity, from confusion to certainty, from reaction to intention. Because when you reach that state, your entire energy changes. You stop internalizing the pain. You stop personalizing the behavior. You stop allowing someone else's choices to define your emotional experience. In this state, you are no longer hurt in silence. You are healing with awareness. You are understanding yourself more deeply. You are watching his behavior without emotional fog. You are observing instead of absorbing. And in this observational mode, you see things you never noticed before. You see patterns he has repeated with others. You see the emotional inconsistencies that once confused you. You see how he responds when you stop feeding him emotional engagement. Some men become defensive, some become dismissive, some become suddenly interested again. But whatever he does reveals more about him than it does about you. When you stop reacting, you allow him to show his authentic character without your emotions influencing it. And this clarity becomes your liberation. When a man hurts you, the most confusing thing you can do is rise instead of crumble, grow instead of chase, stabilize instead of spiral. Because that is the moment he realizes you are not the woman he thought you were. You are stronger, you are wiser, you are emotionally upgraded, and you no longer operate from a place of fear, attachment, or insecurity. You operate from a place of self-respect. When you reach a place where your emotions are no longer dictated by someone else's actions, you create an internal atmosphere of calm dominance. It is the kind of energy that cannot be bought, borrowed, or performed. It must be developed. And once you develop it, you become a different kind of woman. The kind of woman whose silence speaks louder than her explanations, whose boundaries speak louder than her anger, whose self-respect speaks louder than her heartbreak. And this is where the psychological shift becomes undeniable. A man who has hurt you expects one of two things: emotional collapse or emotional pursuit, hurt and chase, pain and explanation, confusion and attachment. These are the patterns he is familiar with. These are the reactions that keep the dynamic predictable. But when you do neither, when you break both patterns by standing in calm self-possession, you interrupt the script he thought he could control. Suddenly, he is not dealing with the version of you he once knew. He is dealing with a version of you he did not anticipate, the woman who cannot be controlled with emotional turbulence. This shift forces him into a psychological discomfort he did not prepare for, because now he cannot tell whether you are hurt, healed, or simply done. He cannot tell whether he still has access to your emotions or whether you have locked that door permanently. And the uncertainty of your emotional state becomes far more powerful than any words you could say. Silence, distance, and emotional clarity create an invisible mirror he must now face. And most people do not know how to confront their own reflection when the person they hurt stops absorbing the impact. But here is the deeper truth. You cannot achieve this level of calm power unless you fully understand where your strength comes from. It does not come from suppressing your emotions. It comes from mastering them. Emotional mastery is not pretending you do not feel pain. It is acknowledging the pain, examining the pain, understanding the pain, and then choosing not to let the pain drive your behavior. When you can do that, when you can feel without reacting impulsively, you reach a level of psychological maturity that fundamentally changes the dynamics in your relationships. This mastery begins with self-awareness. You must understand how you react to pain, how your attachment style influences your behavior, how your past experiences shape your expectations, and how your own patterns have contributed to the dynamics you find yourself in. Not because the pain is your fault, but because healing requires self-understanding. A woman who understands herself is unshakable. A woman who does not understand herself is vulnerable to anyone who knows how to trigger her. So you begin by studying yourself before you study him. You notice the moments where you feel the urge to respond quickly. You notice the discomfort of silence. You notice the instinct to explain yourself. You notice the fear of losing someone. And instead of acting from that fear, you sit with it. You breathe through it. You ask yourself, who taught you that love must be earned through emotional labor? Who taught you that being misunderstood is something you must urgently correct? Who taught you that losing someone is the worst possible outcome? Because pain changes you, but awareness transforms you. Once you begin to understand these internal currents, you start to rise above them. You detach your identity from the emotional response. You stop chasing clarity from someone who was never offering clarity in the first place. You stop searching for emotional safety in someone who has not built a safe space for your heart. This is where emotional detachment begins. And emotional detachment is one of the most powerful forms of feminine strength. It is not coldness. It is not indifference. It is the ability to hold your emotions without letting them dictate your sense of self. When a man hurts you and you develop this level of detachment, everything about your energy shifts. Your communication becomes purposeful instead of reactionary. Your tone becomes steady instead of emotional. Your boundaries become firm instead of negotiable. Your presence becomes calm instead of chaotic. And this new energy forces him to reassess how he interacts with you, because he can no longer rely on your emotional responsiveness to maintain his power. Some men, when confronted with this new version of you, become confused. They want to know what changed. They want to know why you are calm. They want to know why you are not reacting. They want to know whether you still care. And here is the most important lesson. The moment he begins questioning your emotional state, the power dynamic has already shifted. You are no longer the one seeking clarity. You are no longer the one trying to fix the situation. He is now trying to understand it. This does not mean he will admit it. Many men will mask confusion with arrogance. They will pretend they are unbothered. They will act casual. They will say things like, "You seem different," or "You're acting weird," or "Why are you being distant?" But beneath that surface is uncertainty. And beneath the uncertainty is the beginning of accountability. Because whether he acknowledges it or not, he feels the separation you have created. He feels the gap your emotional discipline has opened. And he begins to realize the connection is not guaranteed. But the confusion you create is not the goal. The goal is alignment. You are not responding this way to punish him. You are responding this way to protect yourself. The confusion is simply a natural side effect of your emotional evolution. When you stop reacting, he must confront whether he truly values you or whether he only valued your emotional availability. And that distinction changes everything. Because now he must show his character. A man who genuinely cares will feel the distance and step forward with honesty. He will acknowledge what he did. He will take accountability without excuses. He will shift his behavior. He will communicate clearly. He will treat your emotions with care, not because you demanded it, but because your emotional restraint gave him the clarity to see what he stands to lose. But a man who does not care will respond differently. He will become defensive, he will minimize your feelings, he will call you dramatic, he will try to guilt trip you into returning to the old dynamic. Or he will simply withdraw and move on to someone who reacts more predictably. And this is where emotional intelligence saves you, because his reaction to your newfound calm reveals his intentions without you having to force clarity. When you embody strength, people show you their truest selves. Yet this stage is not easy. The moment you stop reacting emotionally, your mind will try to pull you back into old patterns. You will feel the urge to reach out, to fix things, to smooth things over. You will feel the desire for closure. You will feel the anxiety of not knowing where you stand. This is normal. Your nervous system is used to emotional engagement. It is used to over-explaining, over-giving, overcompensating. But this is where your growth is tested. Emotional power is not developed in peaceful moments. It is developed in the moments where you want to react, but choose not to. Where you want to run back, but choose to stand still. Where you want to explain yourself, but choose confidence. Pain is the doorway, but discipline is what carries you through it. And as you maintain this emotional discipline, you begin to feel a shift inside yourself. You notice that your heart feels steadier. You notice that your mind feels clearer. You notice that you are less reactive and more reflective. You notice that you are not as afraid of losing someone as you once were. You notice that you have begun to detach your worth from another person's behavior. This is the essence of feminine power, the ability to remain soft while standing strong, to feel deeply without losing yourself. This internal transformation ripples outward. Your conversations become shorter but sharper. Your presence becomes softer but stronger. Your emotional availability becomes more selective. And suddenly, he is not sure where he stands with you. He cannot predict you. He cannot assume your forgiveness. He cannot rely on your attachment. And this unpredictability is what confuses him most. Because the woman who once reacted is now responding with intention. The woman who once explained everything now says only what is necessary. The woman who once tolerated disrespect now quietly withdraws from it. Quiet withdrawal is one of the most powerful responses a woman can have. Not ghosting, not disappearing, but emotionally stepping back while still standing in your truth. You are present, but you are not engaged. You are visible, but you are not available. You are civil, but you are not invested. You are polite, but you are not vulnerable. This stance forces him to navigate the space without the emotional guidance he once relied on. It is in this space that he begins to question his choices. Not because you pressured him, but because your emotional absence creates an uncomfortable silence in which he must confront himself. Without your reactions, he is left with his actions. Without your explanations, he is left with his impact. Without your emotional presence, he must face the emptiness created by his own behavior. This is where accountability begins, not through your force, but through your restraint. Because a woman who can step back speaks more loudly than a woman who argues. A woman who can stay calm communicates more powerfully than a woman who pleads. A woman who can hold her boundaries without theatrics is a woman who commands respect. But emotional discipline is not just for him. It is also for you. It allows you to observe clearly. It allows you to evaluate whether this man is capable of love that aligns with your standards. It allows you to see whether he rises to the level of your boundaries or whether he falls back into the comfort of his irresponsibility. As you maintain this stance, you reclaim your emotional space, and in doing so you disrupt the dynamic he once controlled. He may try different tactics to regain access to your emotions. He may try charm. He may try confrontation. He may try vulnerability. He may try denial. People who lose influence will often experiment with different behaviors to regain it. But your job is not to respond to the tactic. Your job is to observe the intention. Because when a man hurts you, the most powerful thing you can do is stop reacting emotionally and start responding intelligently. This shift moves you from emotional dependency to emotional independence, and emotional independence is what truly confuses someone who expected the opposite. There comes a moment in your evolution where everything inside you aligns. Your self-respect, your emotional intelligence, your boundaries, and your inner calm merge into a single steady center. And once you reach this center, the entire dynamic between you and the man who hurt you changes completely, because now you are not responding from pain, you are not responding from insecurity, you are not responding from fear, you are responding from clarity. And clarity is the final stage of power. Clarity is the moment you finally see the situation exactly as it is, not as you hoped it would be. You stop romanticizing potential, you stop excusing patterns, you stop giving the benefit of the doubt to someone who has shown you who they are. You stop craving closure from someone who does not operate from emotional maturity. In this new space, you understand that the way a man treats you is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of his capacity. And once you separate your value from his actions, you become untouchable. This is where true confusion sets in, because the woman he hurt is no longer the woman he is dealing with. He expected you to be stuck in the emotional aftermath. He expected you to remain tied to the hope that he might change. He expected to still have access to your emotions, your heart, your softness. But what he does not expect is your evolution. He does not expect you to return to yourself stronger, calmer, more discerning. He does not expect you to look at him with a level of neutrality that is neither angry nor attached. He does not expect you to stand in your power without shouting, without proving, without explaining. And that is the moment he begins to feel the consequences of his actions. You see, when you rise in your emotional intelligence, you naturally raise the standards of how people must treat you to stay connected to you. You do not need to announce it. You do not need to declare it. You simply embody higher standards through your behavior. You speak differently. You move differently. You tolerate differently. Your energy communicates what your mouth no longer needs to explain. And this energy shift forces him to either evolve or exit. There is no middle ground. The confusion he feels is not because you are playing games, it is because you are no longer playing any. You have stepped out of the emotional battlefield entirely. You are not engaging in power struggles, you are not responding to provocation, you are not seeking reassurance, you are not participating in the same emotional loops. Instead, you are reading behavior, trusting patterns, and making decisions from a place of emotional clarity. This clarity creates an internal confidence that radiates outward. You no longer fear losing him because you realize you cannot lose someone who is not aligned with your value. You no longer fear being alone because you understand that loneliness is not nearly as painful as staying connected to someone who hurts you. You no longer fear the unknown because you trust yourself to navigate any emotional terrain with maturity and strength. This self-trust liberates you from emotional dependency, and liberation always disrupts people who relied on your insecurities to maintain the dynamic. And this is not about punishing him. It is not about making him jealous or teaching him a lesson. It is about protecting your peace. When a woman protects her peace, she sends an unspoken message. I choose myself over your chaos. And there is nothing more disorienting to someone who once thrived on your emotional responses than watching you detach from the chaos entirely. Your detachment is not cold, it is resolute. It is the product of self-understanding. It is the result of recognizing patterns, honoring your emotions, and deciding that you will no longer negotiate your worth. Detachment is simply the natural consequence of realizing that someone cannot meet you at the level of emotional integrity you require. You do not walk away out of anger. You walk away out of alignment. With this alignment comes a new form of feminine strength, a strength rooted in emotional composure, a strength grounded in self-respect, a strength that does not seek validation through conflict. This strength makes you a woman who chooses herself without apology, who stands firm without aggression, who moves on without theatrics. And this, more than anything, confuses a man who once believed that hurting you would keep you emotionally entangled. What truly unsettles him is not your anger but your indifference, not your tears but your peace, not your confrontation but your silence. Not your attempts to fix things, but your acceptance that what he broke is no longer yours to repair. Acceptance is one of the most powerful psychological weapons you have. When you accept what has happened without denying, fighting, or bargaining with it, you remove the emotional leverage he once had over you. Acceptance closes the emotional loop. This is where consequences occur naturally. A man is forced to confront what he has lost when the access he once took for granted is no longer available. When your responses are limited, when your emotional investment is gone, when your presence is no longer guaranteed, when you no longer carry the connection, this absence is louder than any argument you could ever have. Some men will attempt to regain control through subtle emotional tactics. They may try to provoke you into reacting. They may try to pull you back into familiar patterns. They may test your boundaries to see if they still have influence. But a woman who has found her center no longer responds to tactics. She responds only to truth. And truth reveals itself through consistent behavior, not temporary gestures. You begin to see his efforts clearly. You begin to understand whether they are coming from genuine accountability or from fear of losing control. And you respond only to authenticity. If he returns with humility, honesty, and consistent effort, you observe. You do not rush. You do not fall back into old patterns. You do not immediately give emotional access. You let his actions speak. You let time reveal his intention, because a man who truly understands the impact of his actions will show it through behavior, not words. But if he returns with manipulation, charm, or inconsistency, you do not engage. You do not argue. You simply maintain your distance. Because emotional intelligence has taught you that inconsistency is a form of disrespect. And disrespect is never aligned with your standards. In the end, the man who hurt you becomes confused not because you are playing psychological games, but because you stopped participating in the dynamic that once gave him influence. You withdrew your emotional energy. You elevated your standards. You reclaimed your power. You grew in ways he never expected. His confusion is simply the byproduct of you returning to yourself. And this return is the final stage of power, the stage where the pain becomes wisdom. The heartbreak becomes clarity. The silence becomes strength. The boundary becomes peace. You begin to thank the experience, not because it was good, but because it awakened you. It forced you to rise. It pushed you into a higher version of yourself. You now see that the hurt did not break you. It built you into someone far too powerful to be shaken by the actions of someone too weak to treat you well. The power you hold now is internal. It does not depend on how he acts or reacts. It does not depend on whether he stays or leaves. Your peace is no longer tied to his behavior. And this is the ultimate confusion for anyone who once believed they could impact your emotional state. Because when you rise to this level, nothing they do has the power to destabilize you. You have reclaimed your emotional autonomy. This is where you stand now, grounded, calm, self-assured, and unattached. Not bitter, but wise. Not cold, but clear. Not guarded, but selective. You move with intention. You speak with purpose. You choose from strength. You love with discernment. You are no longer impressed by words. You evaluate patterns. You are no longer attached to potential. You align with consistency. You are no longer afraid of loss. You are loyal only to what supports your peace. And when a woman reaches this level, she is unstoppable. She becomes her own anchor, her own protection, her own source of strength. And no man, not the one who hurt you, and not anyone who comes after, will ever have the kind of control over your emotions that they once did. Because you are different now. You are elevated. You are awakened.